So I have to be a little bit careful about my wording here, especially at the beginning of a video. But a panel of experts has met to discuss the Lucy Letby case, and their conclusions are that, in summary, ladies and gentlemen, we did not find murders, said Dr. Shu Lee, a retired neonatologist from Canada. And there were 14 doctors looking into this case. Okay, I mean, you can find any of that online. You don't need me to tell you about it. But perhaps you might be interested in a couple of observations I made while I was listening to the interviews of some of the experts involved. Right, I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. To refresh your memory, there's a list here. Perhaps I'll leave a link in the description. It's in The Guardian. And a distinguished panel of paediatric specialists and neonatologists was convened by Dr. Shu Lee, who is a retired professor at the University of Toronto. And they reviewed the medical evidence which convicted Lucy Letby. And she's serving 15 life sentences for murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 others. The panel members, among most senior experts in the world, examined case notes. The way Dr. Shu Lee organised it, he had 2 experts reviewing each case, and they were all reviewing the cases separately. So there's this team, and each two of them were paired together, and then they were given a case to review, which is a very good way of dealing with the situation. So the doctors, each couple would look at just one case and bat ideas off each other on that one case. So baby 1, alleged to have died from injected air, they found no evidence. Baby 4, same thing. Baby 6, I think the suggestion is that the child was really not that viable to begin with and received poor care anyway for his diabetic condition. Baby 7, overfed. On reviewing medical notes, the panel concluded that her vomiting was due to an infection, possibly enterovirus. And if you remember, there was some evidence from the plumber who was in that ward all the time because there was leakage from waste pipes from other wards which were leaking through, I think, the ceiling of this particular ward. So yeah, I mean, infections are extremely likely. Baby 9, again an air injection, and they reckon that the baby had died from respiratory complications caused by, well, distress and chronic lung disease. Baby 11, baby girl had deteriorated after an endotracheal tube had been inserted into the windpipe, and the accusation was that it was deliberately dislodged. The panel found no evidence that it had been dislodged. And the problem was that the tube was too small and the placing was traumatic and poorly supervised. As far as I can recall, the consultants, the real specialists, hardly turned up on the ward at all. And the ward was left to the care of junior doctors. More junior doctors. Some of them really not that practiced in dealing with such tiny and sick babies to start with. Baby 15, the boy was a triplet and had suffered blunt trauma to the abdomen. causing, damage to his liver. And then the accusation was that air was injected into the nasogastric tube, which, basically blew the insides up like a balloon. Then the accusation was changed to deliberate injection of air into the boy's bloodstream. I mean, make up your mind. If you're going to accuse somebody of something, at least make up your mind what you're going to accuse her of. The panel said the boy had died from a subcapsular liver hematoma, damage to the liver, caused by traumatic delivery. Okay. In summarising their findings, the panel flagged more than a dozen problems that were likely to have contributed to the baby's deaths, ranging from failures of diagnosis, poor skills in basic medical procedures, and poor management of common neonatal conditions. There was no medical evidence to support malfeasance causing death or injury in any of the 17 cases in the trial, the report concludes. Now, one of the comments I heard during the interviews was, one of them was that nurses, various nurses, were bringing to the attention of various authorities lapses in treatment, and nobody was taking any notice of them. So not listening to the nurses. So that's one thing. The nurses were sort of suppressed. And then in a continuation of that, David Davis, the Member of Parliament, said he's taken this matter up quite seriously. He said one of the nurses wanted to testify for the defence on behalf of Miss Letby, and was told by, I suppose somebody in the hospital, that would not be good for you. So she didn't testify. Right, that doesn't sound very positive, does it? Another thing was that the defence team got in touch with... the question was asked by one of the interviewers, why didn't the defence team call experts to go through these queries? And the answer was that the defence team did get in touch with various experts throughout the country and either got back a blank refusal to turn up at the court, or there was no answer at all. So it looks like what was going on was that there was a sort of professional cabal, that the various experts were reluctant to tell tales on the others. Obviously, the specialists had the feeling that if they came in on the side of Miss Letby and she was still convicted, they would forever after be known as the specialist who thought that this awful woman was not guilty. And that wouldn't do their career any good. So some of them said no right out, and some of them just sort of lost the letter. That's also what it looked like was happening. Now, Dr. Shu Lee didn't know about any of this, but apparently the doctor who was the main witness for the prosecution, Dr. Dewey Evans, who was a very highly respected neonatologist, but he had his opinions. And of course, even the most respected of doctors can still get a bee in their bonnet and then be unwilling to consider the other side. Anyway, he used an indicator which he found from a paper by Dr. Shu Lee. And that's the first that Dr. Shu Lee heard about it. He saw a news clipping in which his name had been quoted as having written the paper that Dr. Evans used to justify his diagnosis that one of the children had been injected with air. But when Dr. Xu Li looked at the symptoms that Dr. Evans had quoted, he says, as far as I can make out, that they weren't anything like the symptoms that he had. It was something to do with mottling. Look, I'm not a doctor, but Dr. Xu Li said that the mottling that he described in his air embolism diagnosis was nothing like the mottling as described in the court case. But Dr. Evans had used the word mottling and grabbed that ball and run with it. That's as far as I can make out what was going on there. So it was only merest chance that Dr. Xu Li saw what was going on, decided to investigate further, and then apparently, even from his fastness of Canada, was quite shocked by the way the evidence was presented and decided to do something about it. So what he did was he came over and convened this panel. That's absolutely amazing if you think about it. A doctor from another country, from across the ocean, saw something which he reckoned was a miscarriage of justice, and then actually came in, I suppose, under his own steam, got a load of specialists. Now, you see, that's the important thing. When you have one eminent doctor who is prepared to then gather together specialists, then they're prepared to look at the evidence. It's when they're approached singly that they wouldn't do it. And that might be something that any court case of this type might actually take into account. A specialist on his or her own will feel unprotected and exposed, but when they're convened into some sort of a conference and given a project to do, then they're much more comfortable with coming out with things. And that's an interesting and possibly a novel way of dealing with such cases. Okay, as I said, Xu Li said we did not find murders. And the defence lawyer, Mark MacDonald, said there was now overwhelming evidence that Letby was wrongly convicted. And that's why I don't believe in a death sentence, speaking personally. You can never be absolutely sure. Obviously, they were talking about a death sentence to do with the Southport business because it was pretty obvious who done it in that situation. But for those extreme situations, if you start dealing with those in a particular way, it's going to leak through anyway. It's like the thin end of the wedge. People use that expression without actually thinking about what it means. You've got a pointy end and you put it in and then it opens up for a much wider part of the handle. And that's what happens. So that's why, as I said, I don't believe, however awful, that you can justify a death sentence, because it's not that particular one case that's the problem. It's the cases like the Letby case that's the problem. I mean, people were so disgusted. And of course the newspapers, oh yeah, they were foaming and frothing and everything. Oh, this terrible witch. And it would have gone into a sort of burn the witch situation if there'd been a death penalty. No question about that. And so you can't rely on that in most cases. Well, there we are. The Letby case is still ongoing. There's no doubt that the hospital would have been to blame in some way. It was chaotic, it wasn't well supervised. As we've heard, the plumber said it was full of germs. however many times they tried to keep it clean, because of the structure of the building. The fabric was falling apart. And indeed, it has been pointed out to me that when Lucy Letby was removed, the death stopped. But there is another possible explanation for that, because when they removed Lucy Letby, they also removed the patients. The patients were the status of the ward was downgraded. The more complicated cases were sent off to other hospitals, whereas they tried to deal with them themselves in the Countess of Chester. At that point, they moved Letby, and they also stopped looking after such terribly, awfully, tragically sick little scraps of life. And we do have this problem. And as I say, that doesn't mean that she absolutely 100% is completely, totally innocent. I don't know. I don't think anyone will know. And the way the Crown Prosecution Service and the police and the hospital have dealt with this, they've all covered their own tracks pretty comprehensively. So we will never know. But what we do know is that there is serious doubt about all of the convictions. And so Miss Letby cannot be accused of having murdered anyone. That's the point. Her life is almost finished anyway, isn't it? Innocent or not. She is the victim of a terrible fate. And we only have to feel sorry for that, of course, if she's innocent. Right. Till next time, you can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.